Well, it's good to speak with you today, Kent. Can you start by providing a brief background of yourself?
Thanks, Dustin, and thanks for the invitation to talk today. I've been involved in relationship management, procurement, supply chain management, contract management, and the related areas for over 25 years now. For much of my career, I've been connected with companies in leading edge technologies like aerospace, mainframe computers, high-end consumer electronics, as well as the internet, routing and switching, and technologies that enable internet, such as our being able to talk over the internet tonight. The complexity of these product spaces mean that partnering with others for the right outcome is usually required. So my background has included complex system sourcing, supply chain management, including a focus on sourcing, negotiation, lifecycle management of these complex and the relationships to make it all happen in a productive manner.
And can you talk about what are win-win negotiations and are they real?
Yeah, there are many views on what win-win means in negotiations. A nice simple definition online is when each party is better off after the negotiations have been completed. In a broader sense, I think it means all participants actually wanting the outcome to be good for and, to the extent feasible, optimized for each other. So yeah, I think win-win negotiations are real and that it's a function of the intention before the negotiations as well as the execution throughout the process.
Why are they important?
So humans are very complicated and competitive, and as a rule, we love to win. We've all heard winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. We're taught from the earliest games we learned to play as kids that winning for us means the other side loses. And there's nothing wrong with competition and nothing wrong with adversarial negotiations. It's a matter of what the desired outcome is and whether it's an event-based negotiation or an ongoing performance-based relationship that you're looking for. Competing to win-lose with fellow stakeholders has routinely been demonstrated to be bad for the relationships. It's generally bad for the outcome and it often negatively impacts the overall performance of an organization. If you think about team sports, competing against the other team is the goal versus competing against the players on your own team. I'm not saying, by the way, that competition has to be removed from relationships in order to have win-win negotiations. Just as there can be tryouts for roles on teams followed by collaboration among the former competitors, competition to arrive at the place of the negotiation is a healthy thing. It actually keeps all players at their best. In a value chain, it's critical that all the links in the chain are strong and resilient. All organizations rely on other parts of their organizations for both input, receiving what they need to do their work, and consumption of their output. So knowing that the interactions are mutually intended to be symbiotic is foundational to win-win. The buying and selling of simple goods and services has, in many cases, evolved into complex interdependent systems that must collaborate over time and across multiple events with an increasing focus on customer-focused outcomes. The value chain stretches from the initial ideation with a customer and perhaps a couple of stakeholders, and then continues across a collection of providers of products and services and across the total life cycle of whatever the customer is experiencing. Doing this well requires robust relationships and that they have to have a common good in mind. An underlying understanding of the steps and roles of serving the customer and a foundation of trust that allows the interactions to perform in a synergistic way. We now rely on our value chains for everything from the earliest access to advanced technologies and product ideas, to product fulfillment, customer service, and even end-of-life strategy that our customers can live with. We've all heard of and possibly experienced cutthroat negotiations. We've seen companies claim product gains by simply transferring risk or value from themselves to other places in the value chain. I don't think those are really sustainable acts, and generally they are not win-win in my view. An example, here in the United States, the American automobile industry nearly destroyed its value chain and itself in a downward spiral race to the bottom. People and organizations cannot be vested in your success if they have to be defending themselves against your assaults for their very survival.
And how are they done?
So if you're familiar with Stephen Key's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People and other principles like that, this should sound familiar to you. The second set of habits in Covey's work are about optimizing for better mutual outcomes. There are other frameworks as well. Mutual gains approach is one that's out there by Lawrence Susskind, and he uses 4 steps. But regardless, it really comes down to a few key things. You really need to know what you want. You have to clearly understand your internal requirements and clarify in order to understand your needs versus your wants and prioritize your requirements. You need to be able to process how you're going to select and down select options and think through the actual outcomes as in the give and take of the negotiation. Then second is understanding the other team. This means to truly anticipate and understand your partner's needs. But unlike in a normal game where there's a winner and a loser, here you're trying to understand the sake of your knowing your partner for the sake of actually creating value for your partner, understanding what they want, or vantage point. With the help of the earlier work you did on understanding your own requirements, then you can start strategizing around, again, the give and take of it, and anticipate and start to build strategy. I might have also mentioned before that our internal negotiations are often our toughest negotiations, and in this stage, that's going to be the case. People that are negotiating like to negotiate for win-lose often, and they are very frightened of giving in too soon. So you'll hear things like, I'm not going to negotiate with myself, or I don't trust the other guy, or people that are vested in a win-lose paradigm. It's this dialogue happen, and so it should be encouraged. You want all the issues out. You need to have an honest and collective discussion about what your requirements are and how you feel about the other people on the team, and whether the organization believes that the other partner has your best interest at heart. By the way, even if the consensus on your team is that the other guys don't have your best interest at heart and don't play well with others, it doesn't mean you can't craft a win-win strategy. It simply means that you have to convince the partner to adopt your priorities as their priorities, so that when they propose them back, you can accept them as theirs. This does actually work, but it requires a lot of advanced work, dynamic teaming with the relationships established across both companies. And it also requires letting go of ego and worrying about whether the winning ideas were your ideas or not. Then the last stage is the complete negotiation, the dance, what everybody waits for. This stage is best described around the concept of achieving something neither party could have without the other. Really understanding the concept of synergy. There are many different approaches for effective negotiations, and all can be considered. For me, I would say the keys, in addition to what we've already discussed here, are listening and agility. Listening to understand is not an easy concept, particularly with type A competitive personalities. We think of a conversation more like a fencing match. I'm hearing your words so that I can counter those words with another move so that my point gets across, versus actually trying to get what you're telling me. It's important to have multiple people listening and to collectively reflect on what is being heard. We all know from family and politics, etc., that the same words are interpreted very differently by different people listening. So collective listening is good. Asking for clarity where needed and coming to an understanding of what your partner is saying is really critical. My other point was agility. Dictionary.com has 2 great definitions for agility that I think get to the point here. The first is the power of moving quickly and easily, nimbleness. The second, the ability to think and draw conclusions quickly, and intellectual acuity. In these definitions, you can gather that the point is that negotiations are fluid things and that parties need to anticipate that fact, even consider variable what-ifs, but ultimately to be able to hear, consider, decide, and respond with an intended outcome in mind, all in real time. It's also worth remembering that we often have on either side of the table whom the players are going to be. In a perfect scenario, we would handpick all the players for the skills we needed and listening, problem solving, effective communications. We might even try and factor in chemistry as in, do we work well together? But absent the ideal, we need to each try to approach each other with an open mind and an assumption of benevolence. And what I mean by that is that when we hear others communicate, how will we filter what they're saying to us? We know we all have buttons that can be pushed that make us lose objectivity. What I'm suggesting here is that absent evidence to the contrary, we all need to listen with an assumption that the speaker intended the most benevolent or good or value-oriented interpretation possible. And then we need to keep listening for clarity and understanding. One other point, I stated earlier that we want complete negotiations. I bring this up because there are a lot of organizations that only get 80 or 90% of the deal done and table the rest to be settled later. It should be no surprise that it's usually the case that these last 10 or 20% are around tough issues. Intellectual property, limitation of liability, shared cost for value engineering or constructive changes, service level agreements. You get what I mean, the tough stuff. And it's always wise to take time to get the outcome you need, but that does not mean we'll wait indefinitely for that outcome. We need to behave as grown-ups and finish the negotiation all the way through, and we need to do that before we award business or start on the work. Not doing so is a recipe for losing outcomes. And members on both sides will fight you tooth and nail on this. I've got to have this now. Time to market means we should have started last week. This issue will take care of itself. Let's just leave it alone. Here in particular, the seller knows that the balance of power rests on with whether or not you make this deal stand for finishing first. And I personally experienced many situations where final contract terms were not reached for years because the business was awarded and the urgency to get it done was lost forever. This is simply wrong-headed behavior, in my opinion, and really goes to whether or not the parties really want to do a mutually good outcome and are committed to seeing it through, whatever it takes. So if you can keep people full and the requirement first, you can make it work. So win-win is real, and it's manageable, and I would argue it's the only sustainable way to do deals where what your outcome is, your desired outcome is around product leadership, service leadership, and value to your customers.
And thank you, Kent, for sharing your views on win-win negotiations.
Thank you, Dustin. I really enjoyed our time today, and thanks for the opportunity.